go ahead and start. There we go. All right. Before we get started, we have a vacancy of one of our members. We're going to fill that with an alternate. Which one of you two are up? Okay. With that, I want to open this Board of Adjustment meeting, March 8th, 2023. First item we have is approval of the minutes. We have, I think, 3 sets of minutes to approve. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I have a correction to the first set of minutes. It's the, what's on page 6, as it's shown on our agenda. The 1, 2, it's the second paragraph from the bottom. It's actually the 1, 2, 3, 4th page of the minutes from May 2nd. And that is where it says, Mr. Uhas said that it would be occurring on Phil. That not should be struck. So the sentence would read, Mr. Uhas said that it would be occurring on Phil, not natural ground.
Okay.
And with that correction, I would move approval of all 3 sets of minutes.
I second that motion. Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
All right?
Approved, unanimous. Mr. Eads, I believe last time we were going to have some information concerning the closure of that item at 55th Street condos,
The Dutchman Creek matter?
Dutchman Creek. That would be considered our old business?
Yes, sir. We have resolved that matter
Okay.
outside of the context of having to come back and continue that hearing.
So we can take that out of any old business?
Yes, sir.
Totally resolved.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Ms. Stites, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, sir, I agree with that.
We have everything we need for that, Ms.?
Yes, sir.
Okay. New business, we have an application for a variance. And with that, I think we'll have the planner introduce us to that.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
This is a variance application. As the board knows, it's a quasi judicial hearing, which means that we're going to conduct the hearing in a manner to ensure that the applicant has both procedural and substantive due process. The applicant is entitled to a fair and impartial decision-making body. It is the applicant's burden of proof to prove by substantial competent and relevant evidence the criteria that can be found. My agenda packet was not numbered, but it can be found on the second page of the actual application that's in your agenda packet. Page 18. Page 18, I understand. The applicant is Mr. Nathan T. Stribling. The subject property is located at 119 Northeast First Street. Before we get started, I need to ask the board as a whole a few questions to make sure that we do have a fair, fair and impartial decision-making body. So first, I'll start with, does anyone on the board have a financial interest in the subject matter of this variance application? All right, Madam Clerk, reflect a negative response to that. Has any member of the board had any ex parte, and by ex parte, I'm referring to conversations outside of the context of this hearing with the applicant concerning the subject matter of this application? Again, Madam Clerk. Same question with respect to staff. Has anyone talked to staff about the subject matter of this application? All right. Does anyone on the board have a familiar family or business relationship with the applicant? All right. Again, Madam Clerk, negative response. Has anyone on the board made a site visit to this property for the subject of assessing this application? And I asked about financial interest first, did I not?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Can any member of the board think of any reason why they cannot be fair and impartial and base their vote today solely on the competent, relevant, and substantial evidence presented during this hearing? All right. All witnesses who wish to provide testimony must be first sworn in. They will be subject to cross-examination and to questions from the board. In order to obtain a variance, a 4/5 vote is required, and I see that we have 5 members here today, so 4 of the 5 of you would have to vote in favor. You can append certain conditions to the issuance of a variance if it's rationally related to the subject matter of the variance. Any questions from the board of me? All right, we will proceed first by having all those who wish to provide testimony being sworn in. We will then hear from staff. Mr. Kirkland will present the matter, subject to questions from the board. We will then hear from the applicant, and then we will hear from all others who wish to provide testimony, provided that they have standing.
solemnly swear that the evidence you give to the board during this hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Mr. Kirkland? It sounds like it's.
Doesn't think so.
There we go. Apologize for that. Also apologize for my voice. The pollen has got to me, so I definitely wanted to make sure we got a microphone so everybody can hear me. As we just mentioned, the application you have before you is for a variance related to the fence height restriction in the Code of Ordinances. The property is located at 119 Northeast First Street. First, very quickly, we'll cover the standards that the Board of Adjustment is required to find in order to grant a variance. First, that an unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the regulation. It's not necessary to demonstrate that in the absence of a variance, no reasonable use can be made on the property. And the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as location, size, or topography, hardships resulting from personal circumstance, as well as hardships resulting from conditions that are common to the neighborhood or the general public may not be the basis for granting a variance. Variance may be granted when necessary and appropriate to make a reasonable accommodation under the Federal Fair Housing Act for a person with a disability. 2 more, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. The act of purchasing property with the knowledge that circumstances exist that may justify granting a variance is not a self-created hardship. And then finally, that the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the regulation, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. Applicant must, and the board has to make a finding of fact that all 4 of those standards are met in order to grant a variance. And as the town attorney just mentioned, the variance requires a concurring 4/5 vote of the board in the affirmative to grant the variance. So in this particular case, applicant has requested a variance to the height limitation for fences. Property is located at 119 Northeast First Street. It's tax parcel ID 134EE00901. Zoned R6. It's a residential zoning district. It's subject to a height limitation for fences in the side and rear yard of 6 feet. So the applicant is requesting a variance for an additional 6 feet in height on the northern side of the property from the front corner to the rear corner of the residence. So that would result in a 12-foot fence for that portion of the property. Here we have a small zoning map of the property. It's highlighted in kind of a teal color in the middle. You can see the address point there for 119. As you can see, the surrounding properties are all zoned R6 as well, so it's a similar zoning district in the vicinity. Well, this didn't come out very well. So here's a site plan that's included in your packet. The portion that's highlighted along the property line is where the variance is being requested from the front corner of the house to the rear corner. That is the section where the applicant would like the variance for the additional fence height. This is limited in section 7.8.2 of the Code of Ordinances. It says fences not exceeding 6 feet may be erected only in the side or rear yards and may not extend towards the street beyond the front corner of the principal building. Once again, that's the variance, that's the ordinance section that they're requesting a variance from to change that 6 feet from 12 feet, or to 12 feet. And then we won't cover these in detail again, but once again, the applicant must prove and the board must find that all 4 variance standards are met based on the evidence presented in this hearing. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you might have. Otherwise, I believe up next will be cross-examination and then the applicant's testimony.
Before we go into cross or questions from the board, Mr. Kirkland, now that I have a numbered copy of the agenda packet, it looks like pages 18 through 27 of the agenda packet pertain to this variance application. Would you like to offer that into evidence as Exhibit 1?
I would.
Okay. Mr. Stribling, do you have any objections to that being received in the evidence, the agenda? I let the record reflect there's no objections. Mr. Chairman, I recommend we accept agenda packet pages 18 through 27 as Exhibit 1 without objections.
That'd be fine.
Any questions from the board of Mr. Kirkland? Any?
Well, I'm not sure who I should direct this to, but have you been out to the site?
To go post a sign on the property, yes.
The question I have deals with the specific, I mean, we're looking at the picture on page 24. It shows 3 circled locations where there's identified as reflections. And my question is, are there other places where the reflections hit the house, or were there any indications of other places, or were there just 3 specific places where the reflections affect the siding?
Sure. The staff hasn't verified any of the information in the photographs. Those were presented by the applicant as a part of their.
Okay, so I'll hold and ask the applicant
That's right.
that question then. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Any other questions from the board for Mr. Kirkland?
I have one question. Has a exception to the height of a fence ever been approved previously on Oak Island?
I'd have to go back and look at all the Board of Adjustment minutes.
I recall Steve Edwards told me one time that it was only once, and it was because the issue was a peeping Tom. Is that right, Steve?
Well, Steve's not,
Steve was
Steve's
sworn
not
in.
sworn in.
Even anything right now, he's not under oath.
Okay, thank you.
To my knowledge, I don't have any information to verify or respond to that question.
Precedents would be of interest.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman and board members, whether it's never happened before or it's happened several times, doesn't bear on the criteria. You can take these cases on a case-by-case basis, and you will not be setting a legally binding precedent either way. Whether you grant it today, you don't have to grant the next one that comes in unless you find that the criteria is met. If you deny today's variance, that doesn't mean you have to deny the next variance application for an increase in fence height. But your point, I understand your point. I'm just saying, but since this is quasi-judicial, we have to look at this evidence on this case and compare it to the criteria.
Well, I'd like to ask this question. Is the neighbor next to this house non-conforming in any way to create this problem?
To my knowledge, no.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that answer.
To my knowledge, there's no nonconformities or violations on the adjacent property.
But I read in here somewhere it was 150 degrees against this house.
That's not something that zoning regulates, or is
I mean, is that?
material for the windows.
Who come up with that temperature?
Staff did not verify this temperature. That, once again, that's material that's been presented by the applicant.
Mr. Eads,
Yes, sir.
this seems to be more of a civil issue than a town issue for a variance.
Well, I think it could be both, but I think at this point it'd be premature to, well, I think we need to hear all the evidence first. But that's, the applicant has applied for the variance, filled out the application, submitted everything. So my recommendation, Mr. Chairman, is to move forward with the hearing. And if there are no more questions of Mr. Strickland or Kirkland from the board, Mr. Stribling, you'll have a chance to put on your case, but right now, would you like to cross-examine Mr. Kirkland concerning anything he just said? Would you like to ask him any questions? I don't have any questions. Okay, all right. And Madam Clerk, only Mr. Stribling and Mr. Kirkland were sworn in, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, Mr. Kirkland, you have anything else you'd like to add, sir?
Do not.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And I'll remind the board, you can call either one of these witnesses back up if you have any additional questions. So, Mr. Stribling, if you would take the lectern and present your evidence, and start by stating your name and address, please, for the minutes.
Nathan Tony Stribling, 119 Northeast First Street.
Procedure.
I'm asking for the variance simply because of the melting of the siding, the vinyl siding. That happened within just a few weeks of them putting up the siding, simply because of the time of the year. This happens approximately twice a year that would reflect into that area, and it's usually winter and spring. This happened to be the winter side of it. It takes 150 degrees to melt the vinyl siding. It has melted. The question earlier was about, is it just in those spots? When I took the picture, that happens to be where the spots were. They're actually going from one end of the house to the other, and it's melted from one end of the house to the other. You can kind of see it follows the way the sun moves against those windows. I have spoken with the owner of the property beside, the one that has the windows. They are not willing to help me in any way. So it's up to me to take care of the problem. They will not let me put a film on their window to stop that reflection, which would not hurt anything. But there's absolutely nothing I can do other than put up a fence to block that coming in, or wait a few years for a tree that I don't really have room for on that side of the house. The cost, I've got an estimate from a contractor. It's $4,100 just to repair that one side. I've looked at other options, and to be honest, the other options are way too expensive. I can't afford that. And that's all I have.
Any questions?
Yes, how did you verify the temperature?
How do we verify the temperature?
Yes.
I haven't verified the temperature. The reason is everything that I've looked up states that the vinyl melts at 150. Also, everything I've looked at says that the magnifying of that area can reach well over 200 degrees as far as that. What I was looking at is what it takes to melt vinyl siding. Because to me, that's all that really matters, is melt. You know, I don't care if it's 250 degrees. If it's enough to melt it, it melted it. So, you know, that was what was stated. It was 150 degrees was melting point.
How far apart are these two houses?
I would say 16, 17 foot. Because I figure my side's about 8. and theirs is probably real close to the same thing. And it happens to be the windows that on the second floor that are doing the reflections. There's five, I think it's 5 windows on there, but the 3 at the top are the ones that are reflecting down on it.
How high are they?
Oh, God. I really couldn't tell you. It's on the second floor, so I'd say maybe 25 feet because the foundation's up probably about 2.5 foot.
Have you talked to anyone professionally, in a professional capacity, that this is severe enough to cause fire hazard?
I have not talked to them, although everything I've read, even from the news from Raleigh even covered some of it. There have been cases where there has been fires.
I'm not disputing.
Very
what-
seldom, but you know,
I'm not disputing what you're saying. I'm saying, have you talked with anybody in a
No.
capacity that has you, like someone from the fire department?
no, I have not.
The pictures show where the vinyl has buckled, and you show, the picture also shows several places where the reflection is, and I assume that's where the vinyl has buckled. Is that along a constant line along the house, or does it move up and down? I mean,
It actually comes down.
so it's kind of a line, it follows
Yeah.
this, as the sun
As the
moves.
sun moves, it
follows
moves
the
with
sun.
it, so it follows the sun.
Okay, so it affects a number of the different lines of the
Yes,
side.
because every day the sun is in just a little different position, so it changes it.
Well, are your neighbors here today that have this house?
I've never met them. I've just talked to them on the phone. And my contractors also talked to them, and we could not talk them into doing anything.
I'm gonna tell you what my concern is for firefighting, a house on either side. The reason the rules were put in place, generally, if your house was on fire, it would not be out from your property, it would be from the neighbor's property. And if you got 8 foot from this house, you put up a 12-foot fence, I think it would endanger whoever's in this house from a firefighting point of view. I would think it would make the house more unsafe. They can't, if the fire on your house was on this side, and there's a 12-foot fence, 8 foot from this house, it would be almost totally impractical to put the fire out.
I don't understand
why
why
I'm-
you would get that.
And I'm wondering, have you exhausted all your means with this neighbor to fix this problem?
Yes, I have. We've spoke to them. Me and the contractor together has spoke to them over and over. It started out, when I first talked to her, she'd check and see if it'd mess up her warranty. And then the next time I talked to her, it was, you gotta do all the windows in the house. And that's 20-something windows. And the only ones on that side are 5. We went from that to, no, I'm not gonna let you do anything. So we spoke to her probably 5 or 6 times. I know I've spoke to her 3 times, and I think the contractor's done 3. But I know he's done 2. He spoke to her and explained what we had.
Have you sought legal recourse?
I'm sorry?
Have you talked to an attorney?
Yes, I have. And I can't afford it. It's $5,000 just to take it, and then I have to pay lawyer fees on top of that, so we're looking at $10,000-$12,000 just to do it. And the house was built prior to mine, so is it really a neglect issue? I mean, there was nothing there for them to do, and plus, the state mandated that you had to use those low E windows at one time. Then at one time, they did away with that and said, no, you don't have to, and now it's back again from what I'm reading on the codes for the state.
It looks like we're trying to create a hazard to protect a hazard.
I don't see the hazard you're talking about with the fence. It's starting out as a 6-foot wood fence, and
That's 12 foot, and I'm speaking from a firefighter's point of view. That's one reason I understood that they had set a limit of 6 foot was for firefighters. So that, forget, a man can't stand on a ladder and run a fire hose. Reason for the 6 foot was one of the big reasons, and we can ask the town planner in a minute, is why they set the 6 foot standard. And
And see, I'm with you. I don't understand where there would be a problem as far as fire. We're only talking down one side, not down the front of it, just down the side. The front side would be the 6 foot. And how much does it take to push a fence over in this sand stuff? You know, I mean,
well, if they did put a fence up, we would expect it to hold 100-mile-an-hour wind. We in a hurricane zone. This fence needs to hold 100, 125-mile-an-hour wind if you put it up. I would expect Development Services to put to that spec. We can ask the town planner in a minute when he gets back up there what the standards are.
but, you know, and we got chainsaws too, cut it down. I mean, it's not that, to me, it's not a question of the fence being in the way, because it could be removed. It doesn't take a whole lot to knock boards out of the way.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the applicant.
go ahead.
Have you researched what is the melting point of the fence?
No, I have not.
It's going to be a higher wood fence or the plastic vinyl?
It'll be, no, it will not be vinyl. It can't be vinyl.
Okay, so it
Because
won't be
vinyl
the,
is not gonna help me at all. I mean, I'm just trading one vinyl for another vinyl that's gonna melt.
oh, okay, I was thinking it might be that plastic decorative fence with,
No, it
is
can't be. It
ubiquitous on the
has to
island.
be a wood, and what I'm looking, they make a reflecting paint that absorbs the heat and reflects it off, and that's what was gonna do. I'll be painting that side of the fence to reflect the heat, so that it will not be a pinpoint of,
Thank you very much.
Couldn't that also be applied to the house to reflect that focused light? Something of that nature?
yeah, if it had the right color. That's the problem. Matching it up.
Well,
I mean, I'm not gonna say it wouldn't work, I don't know.
I
The only catch to it is if you paint it, and that's all you do, and it gets hot, it may not buckle, but what's gonna happen to the paint? It's probably gonna get flaky from the heat,
Expect the same thing on the fence, wouldn't you?
you know.
well,
Do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, but the fence is a whole lot easier to paint in the house
Want him to answer?
when you got colors changing because of the sun.
I do. know that a light reflects light and it don't get as hot as dark.
I'm trying to look at this thing in a scientific fashion. Apparently, it's just like focusing through a magnifying glass
That's exactly what they
to
say.
the
It's like,
focal point of the light.
yep.
Is there any way that you can put something, can you reasonably trace the track of the sun?
Can I do what?
Can you basically trace the light as it moves across the house in somewhat of a curvy fashion?
I mean, all I can see is where the sun goes and where it's melted.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it. You can see, but, you know, every day is gonna be a little different track until it finally gets to a point that it doesn't reflect.
You basically can almost tell where it's going to hit the house. You can predict that pretty much, right?
Yeah, to start with, I could. After a while, then it's moved so much that you really can't tell. It's just the whole side, pretty much. There's only a few places it's not
If you had,
melted.
if you had something to deflect, diffuse, or otherwise break up the concentration of that light to its focal point, then you could solve the problem.
Yes.
It's
But see, the thing is she will not let me put the film on her windows.
I'm just saying something on your property that you,
There's nothing. I mean, I'd be willing to do it if there was something I could do, but what am I gonna use?
and have you consulted anyone besides your contractor?
Contractor and the guy that did the vinyl, he spoke with him, but
Is there another authority that you could, like, I'd highly recommend you talk to the fire department.
It strikes me that for as much wood as it would take to build a 12-foot fence, you could re-side the house on that side with wood and not have to build the fence.
Or hardy board.
Hardy board or some material and
well, let me just ask you this. Would you like for your house, brand new, that you built because your wife was handicapped and you had to have something ADA? Would you want a brand new house that within 2 weeks, you ended up with melted vinyl, to have one side done one way and the other 3 sides done another? And if you say yes, I don't think you're telling me the truth, because nobody would really want that.
I don't know that I would necessarily want that. I think you could probably do something that would look very similar. Regardless, it is not necessarily our job to propose alternative solutions, although sometimes we like to do that. But I think, certainly from my standpoint, we need to look at what the purpose of the regulation is, and the regulation for fence height is to ensure that we have adequate light, air for adjoining properties. And a 12-foot fence, it strikes me, would do significant harm to the ability of the neighbor to get adequate light and air to their house.
I don't see how you get that with my house sitting there blocking the light up that high, or higher, really. I mean, when you look at the tip top of the house, it's a much more than 12 foot, a whole lot more. And so that doesn't make any kind of logic to me. I mean, I'm already blocking it with the house. So do I need to tear the house down so I won't be blocking their light?
The point of the matter is the state restricts us to these standards that we have to go by. We can't vary from them. We do our best to be as lenient as possible with them to help as much as we can in these situations. what he was just suggesting was just an alternative suggestion to maybe help you get through. If we can't do what you want us to do or what you won't need to have done, sometimes we just can't satisfy your needs. So I want you to understand that we do the best we can to help the property owners and homeowners. Sometimes we just can't pull it off because of the restrictions the state puts on us. We'll look at this every way we can, but there are some issues here that we have to consider. So you don't jump on it because he made a suggestion that
Well-
it was an alternative.
I really didn't jump on him. I'm just saying, would you want to do that to your house?
No, I wouldn't, but.
No, okay.
If it was the only reasonable way out, sometimes you have to weigh the consequences. I still wonder if it's not a civil issue, and that if we get too deep into this, we might be blocking a future civil issue. I don't know.
I'm like the chairman. I see a civil issue. I will not say what I would have done in these circumstances, but it wouldn't have been here first. I think this is a legal issue.
Mr. Chairman, would you,
Yes, sir.
would you indulge me with a brief recess so I can consult with Mr. Edwards? I realize he's not under oath yet. Just,
Yes, we'll take a recess, 5 minutes.
It is rare, the exceptions to the sign, to the height.
We can't confer out under recess.
And Chairman, when we come back, could you remind the audience that the talking is distracting? I'm having trouble hearing you all talk sometimes.
Pretty weather we're having.
Nice yesterday.
I tell you, it was strange getting up this morning and it was just above 40. Where yesterday it was 62 when I got up.
Right, that's,
Lisa, can I borrow one of your tissues?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Little jacket on my dog to take her out.
You can take the
I'm
box.
not looking forward to changing the time this week.
Oh, well, that's this weekend.
Yeah, I'd just as soon leave it. Let's just leave the time alone,
Yeah.
you know.
In my pickup, I haven't even bothered to set my clock. Few days, it'll be accurate again.
Oh, it's right twice a year.
You have to punch so many buttons, and I got a watch, so I don't bother with it.
Mine does it automatically.
But I just as soon that we just keep it at standard time, and
And leave it alone.
I don't need any more time at night.
Or mode daylight savings time and never change it again. I can vary.
I think this picture is not showing the way the sun comes in. The sun comes in like this.
Mr. Farley, if we could wait till the hearing starts back, okay? Thank you.
Back to the weather. We're not supposed to be talking about this, we can go back to the
Talk about
weather.
basketball.
Basketball.
Yeah.
That's a more heated topic than the weather.
Could be.
We could talk basketball, but my team's not been playing very well lately.
My team's been playing well apparently, so I haven't been paying attention.
Did Carolina make it to the conference at playoffs?
They're playing tonight
They're playing tonight. That's
at 7 o'clock. Well, I don't know if they're playing. They're scheduled to be on the court.
yes.
And I'm familiar with supporting a team like that because I am a ECU Pirates fan, and you got to be prepared for disappointment.
Well, I'm an NC State graduate, so I'm familiar with that. Did you go to ECU?
I put all my children through ECU.
That's kind of my hometown.
Yeah.
There's a notable restaurant in Greenville called Bee's Barbecue.
Oh, yeah, I believe it's still in operation.
It is.
And it has several code violations. I met the inspector there one time, and I said, what about this, Danny? He goes, yeah, we should do something. The place should be torn down. He goes, but where would we go to lunch? That's a true story.
Well, if you come out of there hungry, you did something wrong.
All right, we're back in session.
Tribling, will you come back up? Mr. Chairman, may I ask Mr. Tribling a question?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Tribling, it's my understanding your application is to,
Ma'am, we're back in session.
ma'am,
Okay, thank you.
it's my understanding your application is for a variance to allow you to construct a fence 12 feet in height. Is that correct?
At the highest, yeah.
How did you arrive at the 12 feet?
The way I arrive at it is the windows that are on the second floor are coming down at an angle. It has to be high enough to stop that angle.
I guess my question, let me ask it a different way. Did you measure on your house where this effect is occurring, how high up it was?
How high up the star was?
Well, how high, I mean, did you try to calculate, I'm just trying to see how you arrived at 12 feet. Maybe you may not need 12 feet, maybe 12 feet might not be enough, I don't know. I'm just asking you how you arrived at 12 feet.
When we measured my house, it was just a little over 8 foot on that side,
Yes, sir.
and we're only so far away. I mean, it's not that much. Plus, you're gonna set the fence inside some. I'm not gonna put it on the line. And that should, 12 foot should cover that. May not need 12 foot.
Well, that's kind of what I'm
But, you know,
asking.
it may not be, but that would be, I wouldn't want to go any higher than 12 foot anyway, because then it's going to be much higher than it's going to be higher than my house, by a long shot.
I was trying to ascertain whether less than 12 feet would be sufficient in your opinion.
In my opinion, I would say it'd be possible, maybe between 10 and 11, but I really don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and
That's,
tell you I do, because I don't.
I was just asking, like sometimes
Yeah.
when people ask for a setback variance, they have a measurement because they measured what they want to put in there. And I just didn't know how you arrived at the 12 feet, and that's why I was asking, sir.
Well, yeah, all we done was we stood up against there and look at where it was coming down.
Okay,
And
thank you,
you
sir.
kind of, you know,
Thank you, sir.
I'm gonna say eyeball it.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Stribling from the board?
Sir?
Any other questions from the board for Mr.
Well,
Stribling? Okay,
Yes, I may ask, what would the price to coat the neighbor's windows to prevent this reflection? Do you have any idea of what that would be?
I looked at it, and it depends on what company you go with, just like everything else. And it was anywhere from $250 a window up to $700.
Did you offer to pay that?
Oh, yes.
Then she refused? or-
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I was willing to pay, I mean, anything to fix the problem that, you know, at that point with her.
Did anyone from the company that would apply the coating talk to these people to let them know?
No.
that this would not be a problem for them at all?
Nobody from the company, only the contractor has talked to her about what the film was and how it worked. And that's it, just the contractor.
Do these people live in this house currently?
No. In fact, the house is not even finished. They've been working on it almost 5 years. In fact, the neighbors are saying, when are they ever gonna get done, you know? But they've been working on it for 5 years. And I have not seen anybody since I moved in, and that was in November.
Let me ask you this, since it is possible that it could be a fire hazard, wouldn't it be prudent on your part to have someone from the fire department who is more or less an authority on this to take a look at it and give you some recommendations?
I mean, it wouldn't hurt, but
Thing is, if in fact you have an authority, so to speak, who would basically say this is definitely a fire hazard, then you have legal recourse, I would think.
you know, yeah. I mean, I don't have anything saying that, that I've talked to anybody. All I've done is read cases, even cars have caught on fire.
I understand.
I mean, it's just what I've read on it. And the companies that make the windows deny that it's a problem. And I understand why they do. If this happens at 2% of the windows in the country, to them, it's not a problem. It's only a problem when it's you.
Well, you wouldn't expect that from the company.
Well, no, I think if it was up 50 or 60%, something would be happening. But because it's not, it's kind of a random situation. And from what my neighbors tell me, there's one other house on our street that had the same problem, but their neighbor was willing to work with them. So, it's not that it's a real common thing. Because if it was common, most of the houses on the streets would have the same problem.
The
If
board
I'd
have any
built
other
a two-story,
questions?
if I'd built a two-story house, I wouldn't have the problem. But I can't have a two-story house because my wife's in a wheelchair. She can't walk. She can't stand. I had to take care of her. And that was the reason we built the house, because the house we had back home, she could get in the living room, she could get into the kitchen area, and she could get into our bedroom. Could not get in none of the bathrooms. They were too small. I mean, so we had to do something. And since we'd owned this property down here for so long, it was a no-brainer as far as building something. And you have to build it. I mean, you just don't find very many houses that are ADA. I mean, you just don't. I even looked at doing brick. But it was over $10,000 just to brick out one side. I don't have that kind of money. I mean, my wife's disabled, and here I am with cancer and going through radiation treatments, and I just don't have that kind of money.
Does the board have any other questions for the applicant? Sir, do you have any questions for any of the board members?
No, there ain't no need to ask you any questions. I don't have a clue to what to ask you. I've told you what I've got, and, it's just the way it is. The only thing I can say about you're talking about the fire department, we could put a gate on that whole end and open up a wide spot. They could still get in. I mean, there's ways around that, but other than that, I don't have any questions.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Go ahead.
and with the understanding, I have no idea what the board's inclination is. If they're inclined to grant a variance, they can put certain conditions on it. So you had indicated in your testimony that you intended, if you're granted a variance, to construct this fence out of wood,
Yes,
and you indicated that you would paint that wood with a reflective paint.
correct.
And if, again, have no idea where the board's going to go.
I understand.
But if they were inclined to grant a variance with those two conditions, you would agree to those conditions, sir?
Yes,
Okay. Thank you.
And you would agree to put a gate in it, it would be accessible to the fire
oh,
department?
yes.
Okay.
I mean, I can understand not having a way to get in on that side and having to go around the other way. I hadn't even thought about it, but putting a gate's no big deal.
Could that house be painted reflective white on that side?
reflected white.
Yeah, reflective white in color.
Well-
I don't think that would be necessary if you had some other protection from the problem. Painting on vinyl is
No,
not a good idea to start with.
the neighbor's fault.
Really, I'm still leaning towards that.
I mean, I paid extra to get the color I wanted and the siding. Why would I want to change color? I'd have to change color of the whole house. Why would I want one side white and one side blue? I mean,
May I ask the town planner a question?
Yes, sir.
Being this house is not completed beside all it, I have no problem with him answering there.
Okay, all right. I forgot. You're good, Matt. I apologize.
You're good there.
So we all got one.
Being the house next to this is causing the problem. It is not completed. It does not have a CO. What can town staff do to rectify this problem?
As long as the adjacent property is not in violation of any ordinances or building codes, there would not be anything locally that we can do
These
to resolve
windows
this.
is okay to reflect like that?
As long as they meet all the residential building codes, and to my knowledge, they do, then there's nothing that we
Town
can do.
can't require they put a film on them?
As long as they meet the residential building codes, there's nothing we can do about that.
If in fact the fire department said this is creating a fire problem, it is a hazard, that this reflection is causing it, would there be recourse for the town to say something about that then?
I can't speak to any fire code requirements or any,
No, it's-
anything that the fire department could or couldn't do. I can't speak to that personally, no.
Maybe I should ask Mr. Edwards.
If you would like to, we'd have to get Mr. Edwards sworn in.
May I ask that question, Mr. Edwards?
Steve, will you come forward and
It had to be
be
sworn in.
be sworn?
Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you give to the board during this hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Edwards, we know who you are on this side, but if you identify yourself when you get up to the lectern, please.
My name is Steve Edwards. I am the Development Services Building Code Director for the town of Oak Island. Unfortunately, you were away from the mic and I couldn't hear what your question was.
The question I had, he says, basically because the house under construction, which is causing this gentleman's problem, from the reflection in the windows, even though the house is built with code, if the fire department inspected the area and determined that these windows were in fact causing a fire hazard to his house, would there be recourse from the town to do something about it from this house?
The fire codes do not address one and two family residents, so the fire codes couldn't be applied to this structure, and that would be a legal question as to whether or not the fire department could come in and make additional requirements above the building codes.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Trimley, did you have any questions of Mr. Edwards? Okay. Sir, do you have anything further you'd like to offer?
no, sir. I'm just trying to get this situated so I know what we can do and what we can't do and get it handled. I mean, this is weighing on us and we're dealing with this and we're still trying to move things and it's just, and I have to take care of my wife and with my situation too. I've just got so much going on. I'm just trying to get answers and get things done so that we can go on with our life and do what we need to do.
Yes, sir.
It's just kind of hard, I mean, I ain't gonna, I'm not asking for sympathy. It's just the way it is. I just got so much going on with health issues and then this just compounded it.
And I don't know if it's in your application. How long has this been going on?
November was when we moved into the house.
Okay.
And the first day that I come down and looked at it was probably in October And we did a final inspection in the first of November, and it had melted. And I wouldn't have known it then if it hadn't been for the telephone guy that put in the fiber. So he said, you know you got a problem on that side? I said, no, because I hadn't noticed, and I walked around the house. So it happened in a very short period of time.
And once you noticed it, I believe your testimony was you talked to your contractor, you did some research, and you talked to the neighbor,
Yes,
and then you applied for the variance.
yeah. In fact, I sent a letter to the neighbor, a certified one, or to the one that was on record. And actually, it is a house that's in trust, and it went to her son, I believe it was where the letter went. But he took it over to her, and she called me.
Yes, sir.
So nothing's easy.
Mr. Chairman, those are the only questions I had.
All right. Board have any other questions of the applicant?
All right, at this point, I recommend I don't want to close the evidentiary portion in case you have some questions. We'll suspend the evidentiary portion and you can begin your deliberations. The 4 criteria that the applicant has the burden to prove are met can be found on page 18 of the agenda packet. And we can take these criteria, or Mr. Chairman, you can take these, you and the board can take these criteria one at a time, talk about any one individual, however you'd like to proceed.
We'll do that one at a time. Everybody has it in front of them. First, we have to close the hearing. Do I have a motion to close the hearing?
I suspend it
Oh, you suspended them?
just in case you have, like, in the
Okay.
past, we've had questions come up.
Suspend the hearing until we deliberate.
Right. So I can read the criteria, or you can read it, Mr. Chairman, however you'd like to. The first
You go ahead and read
criteria,
them if you will.
the first criteria is a unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the regulation. It is not necessary to demonstrate that in the absence of the variance, no reasonable use can be made of the property. So the question would be, does a unnecessary hardship result from the strict application of the fence height section of our ordinance?
I believe that,
Who wants to comment on that one?
I believe that the hardship does exist without the fence.
Well, I would say no one comes for a variance unless there's a hardship.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So the question is it unnecessary hardship, and how is the hardship one that can't be ameliorated by any other method other than a variance? And I think in this case, there may be other ways to lessen the hardship short of a variance or as an alternative to the variance. And on that basis, I would say that this criteria has not been met.
Well, let me answer that, and conversely, if I may. It is not within his financial ability to do so, he says. We have pointed out possible ameliorations, if you will, and he said he does not have the money that he can afford that. So it depends on if you would consider that an unnecessary hardship or not. Finances, I would consider being part of that unnecessary.
If I can just comment on that, the third criteria reads, the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as location, size, or topography. Hardships resulting from personal circumstances, as well as hardships resulting from conditions that are common to the neighborhood, may not be the basis. So I'm not saying that the hardship, the personal circumstances, or not even the personal I don't care if the gentleman was ultra wealthy or not, but I think the board can consider the costs of ameliorating this problem by other means as part of the analysis of whether it's an unnecessary hardship, but not the applicant's ability to pay. So I think kind of splitting hairs here, you both make very good points. So the fact that there could be alternatives, if they're super expensive in comparison, that factors into the unnecessary part, irrespective of whether the applicant can build 5 more houses, or, you know, whatever. So,
But I'm gonna say this, we're looking at the last possible remedy. And we're not looking at all the remedies before the last possible. If anybody know the fire marshal like I does, something would happen. Hasn't been tried, they ain't went to them.
well,
They,
they're not required to. I mean, they're required, you, there are certain avenues of the law that if you, for instance, if a staff member makes a final finding that someone's violated the Code of Ordinances, if they do not appeal that to the Board of Adjustment, they can't bypass the Board of Adjustment and just file a lawsuit. It's called failure to exhaust administrative remedies. There is no such precondition on applying for a variance. Just because something else maybe could have fixed this. I hear what you're saying, sir. They're not required to exhaust everything else before they come here. They're required to submit a complete application and demonstrate to you that they have met the criteria. And I'd also say there's been no evidence proffered other than questions from the board about fire safety and things of that nature.
Here's something else to consider. If we go that route and drop it here, walk out, and then go pursue what you're talking about, and that doesn't pan out, and have to come back here, then that's another application, another fee, all over again. With proceeding here and going through with this, whether it's successful or not, if it's successful, he's got that in his toolbox, then he can go to the fire marshal or wherever, and if you get help there, then you might not have to incur the expense of the fence, even though he's got maybe a tool, a variance or so, if he has to go that route. But if he drops it and is not successful with help in the other avenue, he'd have to come through this process all over again.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that standard 1 has not been met.
I second that.
Any
We
further
have a
discussion?
motion and a second. All in favor? All opposed?
That motion
Fails?
Mr. Chairman, ma'am,
What was that vote?
3-2, it looked like,
Yes.
Was
3-2.
that 3-2?
right?
Mr. Chairman, may I make an observation?
Let's make sure we got this last vote.
Okay.
That was y'all 2 in favor and there's 3 opposed.
Right.
3 opposed the motion that the criteria was not met,
Right.
right? Want to convert that to a motion to either issue or grant the variance, then it,
Well,
well, I'm just saying, if you're, it's a 4/5 to grant it.
I was gonna-
after all 4 have been,
Right.
so that's one of the 4.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the observation I was going to make is that number 4 there, I think that the hardship and everything there could be met if we amend his application. He said he was willing to accept a 10-foot fence. I think a 9-foot fence, which is only 3 feet higher, would offer significant relief from the brunt of the sun's rays. And before we dismiss this completely, I think we should ask him, would he accept a 9-foot fence?
Well, we're not close to dismissing it yet. We're only 1 out of 4 standards. Let's continue down the standard list before we get to that point.
I think we
The
need
second
to-
standard,
we need to approach this thing somewhat mathematically from a trigonometry standpoint. There is a distance between here and there. Until we triangulate that to know how high that fence should be, 9 foot, 10 foot, 11, it's moot. We need to determine what that height is. And we need a ninth grade trigonometry teacher to do that for us.
Well, I'll say my recollection of the testimony, well, the application itself requests a 12-foot. And my recollection of the applicant's testimony was 10 to 11 feet might do it, or something to that effect. So,
But here's the problem I have with that personally.
yes, sir.
If you do in fact put up a 10-foot fence and it doesn't take care of the problem, where are you? Well, I'm just saying, we're speculating now, 10, 12, whatever. I think you need some more concrete information there. So do we move on?
Yes, sir. I mean, the application is for 12-foot. You do have the ability to put conditions on granting of a variance.
Right.
If the board's inclined to grant a variance at anything less than 12-foot, I would like to hear from the applicant. But at this point, I think we should go on to the next
Go ahead.
second criteria.
Yes.
The hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as location, size, or topography. Hardships resulting from personal circumstances, as well as hardships resulting from conditions that are common to the neighborhood or the general public, may not be the basis for granting a variance. A variance may be granted when necessary and appropriate to make reasonable accommodation under the Federal Fair Housing Act for a person with disability. There was some testimony about Mr. Stribling and his wife's condition, but as I understood that testimony, the siding on this side of the house did not pertain to their ability to access the house or not access to the house due to a disability. So I don't think that last sentence is relevant.
I make a motion, it does not reach the hardship, number 2.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion?
Yes. It does not, you're saying the hardship results from the conditions that are peculiar to the property. That is definitely a hardship because of the property location and the property next to it.
Well,
Not common to the neighborhood. It ain't here, 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 and here. It's not a common neighborhood problem.
Well, if it was a common neighborhood problem, then it wouldn't be appropriate to grant a variance. It's got to be a unique problem.
right.
And this is unique.
Or actually, the word is peculiar problem to this property. No, I said unique. So. If every single house in a particular neighborhood was experiencing this problem, not every single, several houses in this same area were experiencing this problem, one could argue that's not peculiar. But the evidence here today was 2%. And I don't know if that's nationwide or townwide, but the only number I heard was 2%, which I submit to you. If you find that evidence to be credible, that would be peculiar. Now, whether that relates to the location of the property or the property, that's for you guys to decide.
I have a motion and a second.
Madam Clerk?
All in favor? All opposed?
What abstention?
Did
Motion carries.
well, so you voted,
I abstained from the vote.
that's a 3-2 in favor.
Actually,
Abstention is a yes vote.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
No, you can't abstain unless you're recused. Well, you can, but it's counted as a yay vote.
Oh, I see.
Okay, restate the motion then?
Made it. You make the motion?
I made a motion that it did not reach the hardships is in category 2.
The criteria of category 2 has not been met.
Meet the hardship
Okay.
has not been met.
Did you understand that?
Yes, I do, yeah.
Okay, and you maintain your abstention, which is,
I would vote that the criteria has been met, yes.
So you would vote in,
so, but you abstained a moment ago. Did you not understand what was pending?
That's correct.
Madam Clerk, would you call the roll on the motion that criteria 2 has not been met?
Yes, sir. Board Member Farley? Do you vote in favor or opposed to a motion that the criteria number 2 has not been met?
It has not been met. I would vote against that motion.
Mr. Uhas?
I vote in favor of that motion.
Chairman Simmons?
Against?
Or,
And Mr. Hardy?
Against.
The third criteria is that the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. The act of purchasing the property with the knowledge that circumstances exist that may justify the granting of a variance is not a self-created hardship.
That standard's been met.
Second.
After second, all in favor? All opposed? Passes 3-2.
The fourth criteria is the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the regulation such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. I would note, just on the public safety aspect of that, the applicant has voluntarily agreed to install a gate if the variance is granted as a condition of the variance being issued.
I move that this has been met.
Second. All in favor?
Just so we're all clear, the motion is that the fourth criteria has been met.
Correct. And seconded.
Yes, sir.
All in favor? All opposed?
I say it hasn't been met.
Oh, I thought you'd made the motion that it had.
It has been met, that's what I said.
I said, and I voted it hasn't, but
That's what he said, it hasn't been.
So it's three.
Yeah, I counted that as hasn't been.
Yeah, the
met,
criteria
so
has been met.
All right.
Passed 3-2 regardless.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
to grant a variance requires a 4/5 vote. I know that we went through this criteria on a criteria by criteria basis. At this point, I think a motion would be in order to either grant it or deny it. I'd prefer, well, I just want to make it clear, and I want to make sure all the board members understand the nature of the motion, because there was a little bit of confusion earlier, so. 3-2 would not grant the variance, is my point.
Now, keep in mind, we only met 3 of the 4 standards.
No,
Four have been,
Did we get all 4 of them?
sir.
I thought one of them failed.
no, I don't believe.
No.
Madam
he-
Clerk, was all
he-
4 met?
Charlie sort of switched things a little bit. That's where
3-2.
I don't feel like all the options have been looked at. Is why I can't vote for it.
And again, sir,
All right,
that's not required to exhaust all other reasonable remedies to seek a variance.
that's the point I tried to make, that if we leave it here on the table, and they can't do anything else, have to come back to the whole process again with the expense of it and time of it. So,
Well, and if it's the same exact facts, arguably, you wouldn't even have to hear it. Presumably, if there's a subsequent application, there would be additional facts, but we'll cross that bridge if and when we need to.
all right, call the question.
Well, no motion's been made yet.
Somebody want to make the motion? I move that we grant the variance.
Second.
Have a second, all in favor? All opposed? Motion
Denied.
passes, but the variance fails for lack of a 4/5 vote.
But technically, the motion failed because the threshold is 4/5 for a grant, for a variance. If it was any other type of majority motion, it would have passed, but for purposes of
And the
today's.
record will show that.
Yes, sir. Mr. Stripling, the board has not granted 4/5 in favor of the variance. You have certain appeal rights. I'm not your lawyer, so I don't want to give you legal advice. You may want to consult a lawyer or the town code. I thank you for your presentation and your decorum today, and I wish you the best. Mr. Chairman, staff and I will draft up an order denying this variance and have that circulated for your signature, sir.
Thank you. And we are adjourned.
Matt's going to draft the order.
Thank you.